Welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for Sunday, January 26th. First, we'll make a quick look at the North Pacific significant wave height chart. We see what appears to be a low off of Northern California with 26-foot seas. Another one in the Western Gulf, same situation, 26-foot seas, and remnants from a previous low pushing 20-foot seas north of Hawaii. Otherwise, it looks like high pressure still has a lock off the California coast, but just barely, and nothing really happening off of Japan. First stop on our weekly tour will be the jet stream analysis. The jet stream, of course, is what drives the storm track and also provides fuel for developing storms at the ocean surface. As of Sunday, there appears to be a split pattern trying to develop. Pocket of 140 knot winds off Japan, but splitting heading up towards the Bering Sea. Residual energy continuing over the dateline flat to a point north of Hawaii, and then splitting heading up into the Aleutians and Alaska, and then the southern branch heading down towards the equator. A little bit of a trough here, but it's pretty much cut off. That should be able to support still some low pressure development with 140 knot winds right here feeding it, but this split here is far more troubling. Let's put it into motion, see what happens. As we roll it out 18 hours, pretty much, yes, a full-on split develops with most energy going up into the Bering Sea, cutting off this trough here. And even though there's winds there, that's not going to be real conducive to low pressure development. Of interest here, though, is the majority of the energy sort of dips there north of Hawaii and then actually makes it into the U.S. West Coast. This is a good sign for drought-stricken U.S. Let's roll this out a little bit further, and we see the jet continues to push in here. The split looks to be sort of breaking up come Wednesday, which is good news, and a little more energy seeping into the jet, 150 knot winds, but no real defined troughs. Even that little trough that was in this area is pretty much pinched off and gone. Roll it out a little bit further, then you get another sort of little split. It just wants to keep going up there. Winds pick up, though, off Japan. Energy flowing into the U.S. West Coast. Look at this, even a little trough. Pull it back. Little trough developing early Thursday, pushing into Northern California. That's a miracle. It's been bulletproof high pressure here all fall and winter long so far, so this is a good sign in a different sort of direction. Continuing, and then here we go, another split on late Friday into Saturday. But the residual energy continues to flow east. Put this into motion some more. Then now we're getting back into the classic high pressure here, split pattern, but a trough off the U.S. West Coast continues. Roll that out to 180 hours. You get kind of a backdoor trough thing going on here. So that's cold air and perhaps some moisture for California. This is interesting in that the main flow is almost falling southeast right towards Hawaii. If the MJO were to turn active and more energy were to push into the jet, they could potentially blast right on across here, but that does not appear imminent at the moment. Next, let's go down to the surface, look at surface pressure and surface winds. Of interest, low pressure in the Gulf of Alaska. 45 knot winds pointed at the U.S. West Coast, and in close proximity too. Notice here's the last little bit of high pressure trying to hang on. This low is not far off the coast. It's made it past the Hawaii split point and is it now in the Gulf of Alaska proper, with a secondary low off the eastern Aleutians also following in its tracks. High pressure over the dateline, another little low here off Japan, Kuril Islands, but no winds of any interest. Let's put this into motion real quick. We see that basically these two lows assimilate into one another, producing some sort of fetch in the 40 knot range into about Monday or so, but then that peters out. High pressure builds northwest of Hawaii. This is kind of, you can almost see where the split in the jet would be. Makes perfect sense. This is, the split would probably be right in here, and you have your high pressure. Continuing to put it into motion, You get low pressure trying to form, but there's just nothing to really get it going. And we're into Wednesday already. Now here we go. Little low trying to form off the U.S. West Coast. Swell generation-wise, nothing. I mean, we're talking a little patch, maybe 30-knot winds. But this is the system that's supposed to make the rain for U.S. West Coast. Not a significant swell producer of any kind, but any drops are welcome drops. Here we go. Now we're into Saturday. Low pressure here, 45-knot winds. Here's Hawaii. Put on the Great Circle tracks. Notice this is not really pointing at all down towards Hawaii, but good for sideband energy, and it's relatively close too. This system pretty unorganized, nothing happening there. Continue to roll this out. This low, basically it's a cutoff low. A little bit better now by you're into Sunday. There's some energy pushing well down the, there's about 330-degree Great Circle path into Oahu. And we'll continue to roll that out to the end of the period. High pressure again tries to get reestablished here, gradient off the U.S. West Coast, 25-knot winds, but basically not a whole lot happening. And this is typical of a split jet pattern and a weak jet. After the past week worth of storm production and swells, it's no surprise that it all decides to back off a little bit. So now we look at actual effects of those winds on the ocean surface, as we talked about before. Low pressure here in the Gulf with 20, 22, 24, 26, 27-foot seas, aimed well towards Northern California. What is that? 292. Yeah, so that, or 290 even, and the secondary low up here in the it looks like about 302-degree path, 303. Not a whole lot of this aimed at Hawaii. We'll put it into motion now. See how that plays out. It all kind of lifts north, continues. We're into Monday now. Northern California. It's pushing up north of the, well, here's 302, 295. So you're in about the 298 or so range. And it just lifts north and kind of peters out. Not a whole lot happening. Next, we're looking for that low that's supposed to be north of Hawaii. And there it forms. 28-foot seas. Do it this way. See the energy, reasonably well down the, what is that, about 312, 315 path into Hawaii. So that's not bad. Maybe some swell there. I know it even drops south. Will go back there. Right in there, you're looking at 305, 312 range. So assuming if the low forms, and we're looking into Saturday night, so we're still almost a week out, hardly believable, but there's a little bit of hope there for something, and that continues on through the weekend and then peters out. Oops, and that's it. So generally the trend is way below where we were a week ago. Things have definitely slacked off. So let's go take a look at the long-term projection. This is the Southern Oscillation Index, difference in pressure between Darwin, Australia and Tahiti. Positive numbers like these are signs of the inactive phase of the MJO, and if prolonged enough, La Nina. Negative numbers over long periods of time are signs of the active phase of the MJO and potentially El Nino. As of right now, we're pretty much back in neutral pattern after a good long run of severely high numbers, short but high. Now we're down almost zero. We're at 1.89 for the daily average. The 30-day average is 8.48, which is pretty high, indicative of the inactive phase of the MJO. And that's been affecting the 90-day average, pushing it up to 6.05. So none of this is really suggestive of any good trend in terms of the MJO or storm production long term. Next, let's take a look at surface level wind anomalies. These are variations from normal. Westerly wind anomalies are signs of the active phase of the MJO, and certainly there are fairly strong westerly anomalies over the western maritime continent, almost to the central maritime, and this has been going on for quite some time now, for over a week, almost 2 weeks now. As you go towards the dateline, we're back into neutral anomalies, and then as you push from the date line over, there's Hawaii there and U.S. West Coast, light easterly anomalies. So this sort of suggests that the active phase of the MJO is trying to develop in the west, and that the inactive phase here, these weak easterly anomalies, are the inactive phase trying to push into the East Pacific. Looking a week from now, still westerly anomalies, though far weaker over the entire maritime continent to the date line. So this is a good sign. And then you continue east from there, south of Hawaii, pretty much neutral anomalies and neutral almost the whole way into Central America. So this suggests a continuation of the active phase of the MJO in the West Pacific. This is good news. Here's a different depiction of the same chart, only with time down this axis here. This side of the chart is the West Pacific, this side is the East Pacific, and what you can see in red is westerly anomalies, blue are easterly anomalies. So what you can see that even starting somewhere in early January, westerly anomalies started building in the far West Pacific in the range of about 140 to 150, and have been blowing steadily for, well, to now, and are supposed to peak a couple of days from now. Rather strong anomalies. I mean, if you look at the chart here, that's pretty much to the end of the scale. So this is what would classically be considered a westerly wind burst. Westerly wind bursts are good in that they not only suggest the active phase of the MJO, but they also are key in developing Kelvin waves, and a downward flowing Kelvin wave pushes warm water below the surface of the ocean across the Pacific and gurgles up off of Central America or South America, and that creates a warm pool there which can be implicated or can contribute to the start of El Nino. We're not saying that is happening, but we are saying that we could end up with a Kelvin wave, which could warm water temperatures more in the East Pacific, which could then impart energy to the jet stream. A lot of coulds in that sentences, a lot of potential, but nothing guaranteed. Let's look at some models now. This is the statistic model, runs 15 days out into the future. Blue, outgoing long wave radiation is what we're looking at here. Blue means less radiation, more clouds at the ocean surface, indicative of the active phase of the MJO. Red means a lot of reflectivity on the ocean surface, no clouds, high pressure, the inactive phase of the MJO. As of right now, active phase of the MJO in control in the dateline region, and forecast to generally push east, which is normal, and dissipate some. So some form of the active phase of the MJO is expected over the next 2 weeks. If we go to the dynamic model, it suggests no movement of the active phase. It stays right where it is, and if anything, gets stronger over the next 2 weeks. Clearly, this is the preferred scenario, but the good news here is that both models are in sync, suggesting some form of active phase of the MJO is in effect and will continue for the next 2 weeks. The inference here is that if this happens, energy should be imparted into the jet, and the split pattern that we've been seeing the past week should dissipate, and again we should pop ourselves into a storm cycle. But that all depends on how long the active phase of the MJO sticks around and how strong it stays. Yet another longer range upper air model. The greens are basically in the jet stream, and this supports green suggests enhanced precipitation, and the active phase of the MJO. The yellows are dampening of precipitation and the inactive phase. So the model says as of right now, active phase kind of weak, West Pacific, and this wave is supposed to work its way into South America through the 25th of February. That's a good long period of time. That's yet a whole month of some sort of active phase influence. At the same time, the inactive phase starts getting into the far West Pacific about the first to second week in February and will go on into early March. but at that time yet another active phase of the MJO comes into effect, say end of February, and only makes it to the dateline by the first week in March. The interesting part about this chart is it's suggesting that the inactive and active phase are becoming stronger and a little bit more regular. For the past 2+ almost 3 years, the MJO has been almost non-existent, so this suggests some return to a more normal pattern, perhaps a little bit more support for storm generation as well. But again, how accurate is a model? It goes out 40 days. It's a good gives you a rough idea, but nothing more. Let's take a look at sea surface temperature anomalies. These are variations from normal for the season. What we notice is, and this is the key area here for monitoring El Nino, La Nina. Notice basically it's a neutral weather pattern. There's pockets of cooler water, but there's also pockets of warmer water. But of more interest is right back in here. This water here basically gets pushed by the trades from off of Central America. During El Nino, all this would be cold. During La Nina, all this would be hot. The strength of El Nino would depend on how hot the waters are. But what is interesting is normally it's cool water off of Peru, Chile. None of that. If anything, it's warming half a degree to a degree to maybe 1.5 degrees in pockets. Some of this is the effects of a Kelvin wave that's impacted the coast, been right in this area, been doing that for the past several weeks now. Warm water gurgling up to the surface, flowing back. But all this energy gets imparted into the jet stream. It might take a month or 2 or even 3, but it's a step in the right direction. The other little thing we've been monitoring is off of, there's been high pressure here, clockwise circulation. It's really been, it carved out kind of a cool pool coming off the U.S. West Coast almost down to the equator. That's filling in a lot more with warmer or at least neutral temperature water, suggesting the high is breaking down some, and we're getting kind of more into a seasonally normal sort of pattern. Of course, this large pocket of warm water here, this has been here for months since the summer. It's been trying to work its way into California. It's been held off by the high pressure and by a lot of upwelling and cool water here, but it looks to be making a little bit more inroads now, which is good, if nothing else, just for warming up the water temperature in central and northern California. The other little thing we've been monitoring is this pocket of cooler water. It's not really on the equator, it's south of the equator, but sometimes you get this teleconnection thing going on where what happens here develops on this, what happens here in the Atlantic develops here in the Pacific. There's somewhat of a similar pattern going on right in these areas, with most of the warm water to the north here, and you could kind of stretch it and say so there, but there doesn't seem to be much of a correlation going on. So we're going to say we're going to call the bluff on that and say that that's not really a factor at this point in time. So as of right now, basically neutral to slightly warm water here, building warm water off of Peru and Ecuador, and that is a fairly encouraging sign. And finally, subsurface water temperatures. This here is the actual water temperatures, not so informative, but the anomalies here are what's interesting. Previously, notice this pocket here of warm water. We had a Kelvin wave, and it was very similar to that. It migrated the whole way across. So this is the West Pacific, this is the East Pacific, migrated the whole way from the date lines right about here, there you go, 180. Migrated the whole way from here into Central America, went off the chart, and is now gurgling up on the surface and heading back, being carried by trades. So we have this pocket now, which is good news. We think this could be another Kelvin wave developing from better part of 2 to 3 weeks of westerly winds blowing on the ocean surface here. But what's kind of troubling is we have a pocket here of 2 degrees below normal water temperatures at 110 west and down at about 75 meters. If this continues and forms a blocking pattern, then this is going nowhere. But we suspect that this is just going to work its way off the charts and open the door for warm water to start moving into this area. I mean, it's going to take the better part of 2 to 3 months to make the journey across the Pacific. But this is something to watch for. This pocket just recently developed, and it was right behind the previous Kelvin wave that's pushing into to South America now and Central America. So we suspect it's sort of a reverse, just a spring back from the Kelvin wave, and that it will dissipate and this will move in to fill the void, but that is far from guaranteed at this point in time. Something to watch for in the future. One other thing, here's the Southern Oscillation Index numbers. We saw those earlier. They're high. They're in the positive range. If we were in El Nino or all these downward pulses here, that's the active phase of the MJO. We're clearly not in that position. We want to see these numbers starting to fall and really get to zero before we're at least in some decent point to support storm development. So that's just another thing to look for in the future. And just a quick recap, here's the rollout from the big storm, storm number 4 that slammed Hawaii in the U.S. West Coast and gave us the Mavericks Invitational. Nice, small, compact storm, 48-foot seas, peaked out on about 12Z on Tuesday. That's about 50, so we can zoom in here and take a peek. Here we go. And we're into, here we go, that's 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, either 57 or 58-foot seas over a small area, all aimed east. There's the, here's the Great Circle charts into California. It was all aimed well up those paths. Here's the Great Circle charts, or Great Circle paths into Hawaii, not basically going perpendicular to those, but because it was so close, Hawaii got slammed with giant local swell. We can also throw Southern California paths in there, pushing well up those as well. And then let's go take a look at. And then finally, a look at the same storm, but this time with the Jason 2 overlay. And we finally got the Jason 2 satellite data up and running. It was maybe a couple of weeks ago, and it really paid off big on this storm. We got a pass on, what was that, on Monday 18Z. So we had an average measurement, 15 measurement average, 39.3 feet with one peak reading at 44.8, where seas were about 41 feet, maybe 42 feet for the model. So this is a good pass. And what's really interesting, on the old Jason 1 data, at least on our depictation of it, anything time we got seas above 40 feet, it pretty much just can't cut off, and that was the end of it. But Jason 2 does really good. It seems to be able to read the higher seas well, and that's especially interesting when we got into yet another pass right here. So we were in the 51 to 52 foot sea range here per the model. The satellite made a pass over that flank, recorded 47.8 foot for a 15 reading average with one peak reading of 54.7. That's very close to what the model suggested, and sure enough, the swell materialized in California and in Hawaii about as expected. Rather short duration of the really high seas in Northern California. It actually hit overnight and right before sunrise on Friday, but still good, solid, long period swell. It's good to have the Jason 2 data back, so that's our final little nugget for the evening. So that's our forecast for this week. Thank you for watching, and we hope you enjoy it, and we appreciate your comments on the YouTube channel. Thanks again, and we'll do this again next week.